several people that have registered for this call, but I think in the interest of time, we go ahead and kick off. So I am pleased to introduce to you Betsy Gardner Eckbert, President and CEO of the Winter Park Chamber. Go ahead, Betsy.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thanks to my team for all the things that you all do behind the scenes to keep us going with this. I'm very proud that we're able to deliver content every afternoon at 4, Monday through Thursday, and that we've got our daily briefing coming out each day. We have featured quite a lot of the work of Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy and her team in our communications. So our whole purpose for existing is our mission, which is to convene people and ideas for the benefit of our businesses and our community. We weren't quite sure how we were going to be able to do that after the stay-at-home order, and I'm really pleased and grateful to my team for creating a way for us to engage our community right now and to deliver content that we hope will make a difference in the life of your business. So today it's my absolute privilege to introduce and welcome U.S. Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy and her staff today to this call. Congresswoman Murphy represents Florida's 7th Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives. The district includes all of Seminole County and much of northern Orange County, including downtown Orlando, Maitland, Winter Park, and the University of Central Florida. The Congresswoman serves on the influential House Ways and Means Committee, where she's a member of the Subcommittee on Trade and the Subcommittee on Worker and Family Support. Previously, Congresswoman Murphy was a businesswoman and college instructor after serving as a national security specialist in the Office of the United States Secretary of Defense, where she received numerous awards for her distinguished service, including the Secretary of Defense Medal for Exceptional Civilian Service. She worked on a wide range of security issues, from counterterrorism to foreign military relations to strategic planning for the department. Prior to her public service, the Congresswoman was a strategy consultant at Deloitte Consulting, and the Congresswoman holds an MS in Foreign Service from Georgetown University and a BA in Economics from the College of William and Mary. She does live right here in Winter Park with her husband and 2 young children. Please do join me in welcoming Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy.
Thanks so much, Betsy, for your introduction. I really appreciate you organizing this call, and thank you to everybody who's on the call with us today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the congressional response to COVID-19, as I know this has been an incredibly challenging time for all of us. I think what I'd like to do is to offer some brief framing remarks and then outline what Congress has done and is doing to combat COVID. I'll try to focus on the aspects of our response that I think will be most useful to you as entrepreneurs and as business owners, but I really want the information to flow in both directions. I want to know what you're seeing and hearing, because what you're dealing with, because you're the ones that are having to deal with this real time on the ground, and your feedback to me helps us make the necessary changes, whether that's from a regulatory perspective, pushing the administration to make some changes in its implementation of our laws, or whether we need to take another swing at things and write new laws. But let me just first, by setting the context for this, COVID-19 is first and foremost a public health crisis, but it has spawned a sudden and very profound economic crisis. A wide range of businesses have been forced to shutter or dramatically scale back operations. I know that many of you are experiencing that personally. I know that there are a lot of businesses that just a few months ago were thriving or at least surviving, and now they're standing on the brink of disaster, trying to figure out a way forward. Also, we have families that had stable jobs and were earning stable incomes, and now they're looking at the prospect of unemployment for the foreseeable future. Additionally, we have folks who have seen their retirement and investment accounts precipitously lose value. Also, there are a lot of homes where we now have our kids at home. They're missing out on their in-school education because of the closures of their schools or colleges or daycares. So And then I think as a community, you know, we're worried about some of the more mature people in our lives who are more likely to suffer the serious health effects from this illness. But I also recognize that there have been a number of things that have been required of us from a public health perspective, and that comes in stark contrast to the principles and the values of personal freedom. You know, that's a founding principle of this country. It's one of the reasons I love it so much. But right now, we're all making some real personal sacrifices for the common good. And so it's important that we continue to do that, because COVID-19 is above everything else, really a threat to public health. And that threat can only be defeated through science and medicine. And the economic recovery can only begin when we have gotten a handle on the public health elements of this. So we have to be able to conduct more testing to identify people with COVID so that we can isolate and treat them. We need better therapeutics, better treatments for people with COVID so that they survive their ordeal and recover. We want to make sure to keep our mortality rate low. We need essentially a large-scale Manhattan Project style research effort to develop a vaccine and some of those therapeutics. You know, that's really the only way this crisis ends. So until then, we have to, you know, soldier on, do everything possible to support workers and businesses who are being hurt by forces beyond their control and through no fault of their own. And so from a congressional perspective, we've been trying to deal with both elements of this issue, both the health crisis element as well as the economic crisis element. We've been able to pass 3 bipartisan bills within the span of a month, which is quite a feat in itself. And I want to just highlight a few of the key provisions, and then happy to open up for questions and have a more detailed discussion about what we've done. So given that this is a public health crisis, the very first bill that we put out was one that focused primarily on getting resources into research and development on testing, on treatments, vaccines, and the production of medical equipment and supplies. You know, we really have to provide these resources to the health workers, our hospitals, and our healthcare system. And there was an element of small business in that first package, but the bulk of that was really trying to make sure that we had the resources to respond from a health perspective. We've also more recently provided free COVID-19 testing for all Americans, whether they have insurance or not. Nobody should have to pay a penny to get tested. And of course, now we're working with our state and healthcare systems to try to ensure that the tests are available. We've provided 2 weeks of paid leave, paid sick leave for workers who are sick or quarantined, or who are caring for a family member who's sick or quarantined. I think it's critically important that people have access to sick leave so that they aren't going to work sick themselves or having been exposed to somebody with COVID and then going to work and further spreading the virus. We also provided 10 weeks of paid family and medical leave for workers who have to stay home and take care of a child whose school or daycare is closed. And I was deeply involved in drafting this provision. At the end of the day, the way it passed wasn't perfect, but I am proud we got some of that in. The employers who are required to provide these paid leave benefits to their workers will get reimbursed at 100% by the federal government. We should really backstop. The federal government has a role in backstopping paid family and medical leave to make sure that workers can stay home. We probably should expand this provision to include people who are actually sick or caring for somebody who's sick. And then we provided nearly every adult who has a Social Security number with a check for about $1,200 or for $1,200 and an additional $500 per child. Those amounts begin to phase out for individuals earning more than $75,000 or $150,000 for married couples. And we're trying to get these checks out the door as soon as possible. We've made massive investment in the state unemployment insurance programs. so that workers who lose their jobs still receive the support they need to take care of themselves and their families. As we are watching the unemployment numbers tick up precipitously, this is really an important provision. And it's particularly important here in Florida, which has perhaps the least generous unemployment insurance program in the country. Specifically all around unemployment, we've provided every American receiving unemployment with an additional $600 increase to their weekly benefits for 4 months. And then we increase the length of time for which these benefits can be received, and also allowed part-time, self-employed, and gig economy workers to access these benefits, all things that they hadn't been able to do in the past. We've made a range of assistance available to struggling small businesses and their workers, including nonprofit organizations and self-employed workers and startups. So for example, the CARES Act, the third of those bipartisan bills, provides $350 billion in forgivable loans to small businesses to maintain their existing workforce and to help pay for other expenses like rent, mortgage, and utilities. It also provides $10 billion for SBA emergency grants of up to $10,000 to provide pretty much just immediate relief to firms so that they can cover their operating costs. And then we provided $17 billion to cover 6 months of payments for small businesses who already have an existing SBA loan. We can talk about the implementation of these elements in our Q&A. I have received already a lot of feedback about unintended consequences, trouble in the implementation, and I'm happy to talk further about that. Your feedback on this area is critically important, as it is on all elements of the federal response, so that we can either work with the executive branch to make it better, or so that we can rewrite legislation. And then finally, I wanted to highlight a provision that I'm particularly proud of, which is a proposal I've been pushing called the Employee Retention Tax Credit, or the ERTC. We fought really hard to get this in the final bill. It wasn't in the Senate bill originally. And while we were ultimately successful, it was a bit more scaled down than what I had hoped. And I believe in this ERTC because I think it's important to keep employees tethered to their workplace. And it's also important that the government backstop that payroll. We're seeing it done in a lot of foreign countries where recognizing the impact of the public health crisis on businesses, government is stepping in to support payroll. Anyways, the way that the ERTC works is it's a fully refundable tax credit that employers of any size can claim. The credit is equal to 50% of qualified wages paid to an employee up to a total of $10,000 in qualified wages per employee. And the credit would be taken against the employment taxes with any excess refunded to the employer. The credit is available to employers that had to fully or partially suspend operations due to a government order, or to any employer that had a 50% decline in gross receipts for any quarter in 2020 compared to the prior year. So, compared to the same quarter in 2019. I'm excited about the credit, and I'm hopeful that it will be of use to workers and businesses alike. There's certainly a lot more work to be done, and my office is pushing for additional relief to American families and businesses. And if you own a business, my office stands ready to walk you through the options that are available to you under the various pieces of law. We also, on our website, have a set of resources to point you to the latest FAQs or guidance provided by small business or the other federal agencies in its implementation of any of the legislation that we pass. And again, my door is open. Keep us posted on any pain points you're feeling as you're applying for assistance. We can work with you from a caseworker perspective and help you follow up on applications and things like that. And then also we'll take your feedback and try to make the federal response better. So with that, I just want to thank you again for joining the call, and I'm happy to answer your questions and hear your comments. So I'll turn it back to you all.
Thank you so much. And at this time, we would like to open the floor for questions. And to do so, I encourage you to raise your hand through Zoom. This would be our first choice for answering your questions, as we'll be able to hear your question in full. And to raise your hand through Zoom, what you do is click on the bottom of your screen where it says participants. And on the bottom of that participants list, there'll be an option to raise hand. Simply click that raise hand, and you can raise your hand now, and I'll get to you one at a time. Mary Scott, I'll go ahead and unmute you, and you can go ahead with your question. But you're unmuted on our end. If you unmute on your end, you should be able to speak.
Okay.
Go ahead. You got it.
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you so much for doing this, and I appreciate the chamber setting this up. I heard yesterday that the $1,200 check that will be going to people who are on Social Security, that if they have direct deposit, they will get it right away. But if they are expecting it by check, it could be August before they get it. Is that correct?
That is correct. Unfortunately, the way that the IRS is implementing, they have said that it could take them up to 20 weeks to get the payments that are by check out the door. We did provide, so Congress provided the IRS with resources to ramp up to be able to implement the additional responsibilities. And what you're seeing is there are a number of agencies that over the years of the idea of big business is bad, or I'm sorry, big government is bad, have been cut to their bone. And so they were already struggling to provide the normal assistance that they would. And now this additional responsibility on them is just taking some time. I will say, so there, but IRS understands that the intent is to try to get as much money out the door as quickly as possible. The direct deposit does that first, and checks are just a little slower for them to cut and get out. I will say one of the things that we were able to work with IRS on initially when they were going to implement this legislation and the additional $1,200 checks and $500 for kids, they were going to require Social Security beneficiaries to file a short form tax return. Many folks on SSI don't file a tax return, and they were looking for a 2018 or 2019 return. And so they were going to require these folks to do that. We were able to work with them to remove that requirement so that they can provide the return without our seniors having, and other folks who are on Social Security having to go and file a short form tax return in order to receive their check. So we're trying to block and tackle and clear the path for getting those checks out into people's hands as fast as possible. But you're right that some of those paper checks could take up to, as the IRS has said, 20 weeks.
Thank you so much, Mary, for your question. And Ty, I see you have your hand raised. I'm going to unmute you, and you're welcome to ask your question now. Just unmute yourself on your end.
Good afternoon, Stephanie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. I have a question. I saw today that Wells Fargo reached their $10 billion loan cap. What's going to happen to small businesses who don't do business with that particular bank because they're taking their customers first in order to gain access to loans?
Yeah, we're having this issue all across the board with the implementation of PPP. Because the way that the senators designed that program, it requires banks that have an existing 7A portfolio or who are accustomed to providing 7A loans. Those are the first folks who can provide this PPP loan. But we do have provisions in they wrote, the senators wrote provisions to allow other banks and other lenders to eventually get accredited to provide these loans, but just not right away. The other thing that's that is a flaw in this system is that small businesses that don't have loans, folks that might have a business account but who don't have an existing loan, are being put at the end of the queue. And so it's incredibly unfair, I think, to a small business that bootstrapped it and didn't need to take out a loan, who in this moment of need, they are the ones that have a more difficult ability to access loans. So we just got a frequently asked questions memo from SBA with questions about PPP. We'll post it on our website and you can get more details on that. But we have got to go back and expand and strengthen PPP loan program. We also have to do more to assure the lenders that that they're not taking risk. And I think in providing these loans, and that's been part of the friction of getting these loans out. A lot of these banks don't want to be responsible for having made a bad loan, but they are fully backed by the Fed. And I don't think anybody is trying to play gotcha with the banks right now. We're just trying to get money out the door. I think it's in my opinion, if you were trying to secure the payroll, an expanded ERTC would have been a more direct way to be able to backstop payroll, because it would have been run through the existing systems. You file your payroll on a quarterly basis. We give you a tax credit, and then we cut you a check for anything above that. That would have been, I think, a cleaner way to get at this. But this is the sausage making of legislation. The Senate was really big on this PPP loan. And now that we have it and there's a lot of money there, what we have to do is make sure that it actually works for small businesses. And so the feedback that you've given me, and you're not the first person to raise the issue about Wells, but there are a number of other issues, and we just have to work with the banks, work with SBA, and provide more resources. And we're already hearing the Senate talk about maybe putting more money into that program so that there's enough money to cover everybody. I get that it doesn't help you as a small business in this moment if you are unable to access that PPP loan for any number of the reasons that I listed above, because you're trying to make some important decisions about whether or not you keep people on. And small businesses, having had some experience there, this is like family, and you're trying to figure out not just from a business perspective what to do, but what to do for people who are like family to you. So we owe it to you from a federal government perspective to fix the rules and provide more resources and create programs that actually work for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just have a quick question also. What is the state doing in terms of the unemployment registration system, the unemployment office here? Because it's very hard to get through to them. And I know a lot of friends of mine who are in the hospitality industry are complaining about how difficult it is to maneuver it and also to get in for benefits. What is the state doing for that, for people that having issues at the moment?
Not enough. The state isn't doing enough. But beyond, you deserve a real answer to that other than my flippant response. But it is incredibly frustrating to me because what you are seeing is a result of purposeful policy decisions at the state level to create the most difficult and cumbersome unemployment program to discourage people from taking it. It's rooted in the belief that people are unemployed because they're not willing to work. Well, that philosophy is coming home to roost now that people are unable to work. And, it's a cynical perspective, and we are paying the price for the cynicism towards people who seek unemployment. Our Florida system provides one of the lowest benefits. And now that the federal government has provided an expanded program Florida has accepted that expanded program, but they don't have the capability to process it because their website doesn't work. They don't have enough processors. All of those things were intentional things so that people had a hard time getting unemployment. And now that people desperately need it, the system has fallen down on itself. And the federal government has given, it's given Florida $60 million to implement an expanded program. But you're not seeing this problem in other states. You're seeing this problem in Florida at the level that you're seeing it because of years of an intentional approach of making unemployment unusable. And unfortunately, you know, unfortunately, the people who are paying the price for this ideology are the Floridians who desperately need unemployment right now, not because they weren't willing to work, but because the government is creating this public health crisis is preventing people from actually going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so my office has been very vocal in calling for this governor and this administration to take the money that we have given them and put it to good use and make a system that actually is responsive to the Floridians and to my constituents who need this help now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ty, for your questions, and thank you, Congresswoman. I see we have a question now from Sal. Sal, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and if you unmute yourself, you're welcome to ask your question.
Okay, thank you, Amy. President Trump mentioned about removing the Oversight Committee. Can you provide an update on that?
So as a part of passing a $2 trillion bill, in addition to the billions of package 1 and package 2, we pushed for some oversight of the implementation of that money. And I lead a coalition, the Blue Dog Coalition, who believes in fiscal responsibility and a strong national security. And so it was a huge priority for us to get an oversight board in as a part of this massive amount of taxpayer spending. Those are taxpayer dollars. We're going to pay for them today, or our kids are going to pay for them. And they're necessary in this moment of crisis, but we should have the ability to have some oversight on how that money is spent. I think that's the bare minimum that people would expect when you see government spend this kind of money. And you know, there were 3 oversight provisions that came through, and the president is trying to weaken the one related to inspector generals. And I think that's wrong and unacceptable. There are 2 other provisions, and we're going to try to use those in order to follow every dollar. But he basically removed the stimulus watchdog, and it's just the latest in this administration's reluctance to have, oversight or responsibility to taxpayers. And so I think, Congress has to do its job too, which is to provide that, to find ways to create that oversight and to track the money and to make sure that we're spending it as it was intended by law. So we'll do the best we can, but it's an uphill battle.
Yep, thank you.
Sal, thank you so much for your question. I see we have Kelly Price with her hand raised. I'll go ahead and unmute you, and others on the call, you are welcome to raise your hand. Just a reminder on how to do that. Click on the bottom of your screen where you'll see a participants icon, and then on the bottom of that participants box, there's a little icon that says raise hand, and I'd be happy to unmute you for a question. Kelly, go ahead with your question when you are ready.
Hey, Ms. Murphy, it's Kelly. Just a couple of thoughts. If you could just take back to your next group meeting that I think 20 weeks for people to receive their funds from the government that help them is a long time. And I'd also like to see your group take more action on getting the PPP passed through rather than all the roadblocks and hurdles that we're all encountering on the websites and trying to talk to bankers. So I'm sure you're aware of it, but I just want to voice it. I just think that this all is so important. It's been promised to us, and it is y'all's responsibility to make it happen. And it can't be 20 weeks, and it can't be stuck in some pipeline because there's no help or no assistance, or the money's there and it needs to be released. So if you could go back to your group and just say, you know, as a concerned citizen and someone that is very, very vocal, I'll probably write to you after, but you guys have got to do better than 20 weeks, and you got to do better than just saying, hey, it's coming. That doesn't work.
I agree with you, Kelly, that the administration
Thanks.
has to do better than 20 weeks and that their implementation of PPP has to be better. And as Congress, after providing the resources, we are now providing the oversight to push those agencies, those administration agencies, to do better on behalf of our constituents. So couldn't agree with you more.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to go to a question that we received via email. This is from Scott Lau. It's in reference to the many people that are gig workers here in Orlando. Overall, the question is asking really, what are their opportunities? Are they eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program, unemployment? If you could touch on a little bit of those options, I think that would help clear up some things for a lot of people.
Sure. So all self-employed or sole proprietors or independent contractors are eligible for PPP. You don't need to be on your own payroll. Other documentation will suffice. Businesses that need only to have been in operation before February 15th, 2020 to qualify. And the PPP will pay for the payroll expenses. So if you're using PPP, you are technically working and thus not eligible for unemployment. If you're no longer working and then looking for work, then yes, we also have unemployment insurance to cover the self-employed, which previously that was not the case. So there are a number of places where self-employed, sole proprietors, or independent contractors can seek help. And if Scott needs specific assistance, he's welcome to call my office and we can help him navigate those various programs.
Thank you so much. I'm receiving a couple of other questions through the Q&A box. One is about the economic impact payment. Wondering if you could shed some light on why college age or dependents over 17 were not included in that.
So that is a problem that we need to fix. I lead Future Forum, which is 50 of the youngest members of the Democratic Caucus, and we try to focus on issues that matter to next generation Americans. We have heard loud and clear from young Americans that many of them are still dependents. They're still in their families' homes. They're the ones who are now no longer attending their classes in college settings. So, and I heard it on my youth advisory board in my district. We've written a letter on this, as well as co-sponsored a bill to make the necessary change to be able to include children under the age of, I think it's 26 is the new proposal that we have, who are dependents. You know, it was, they basically, when they wrote the legislation, what they did was they used the child tax credit definition. That, as you may recall, was revised in the Republican tax bill. And while it was good that we included children, they moved too fast, and so they overlooked the college or older children who were still dependent. And it's something we're going to work on trying to get fixed.
Thank you so much for answering that. Just a quick question that just came through from Mary Rembert. If people are filing for unemployment, is that extra $600 that you mentioned automatically added, or is there another process for that?
So so unemployment is a federal state program. And so it is automatic. We have provided the money to the states. The states need to process it through their unemployment systems, and it will be that additional 600 will be good until the end of July. But we are already looking at the next COVID package that we're working on, and we could possibly see that extended beyond July, the supplemental amount.
Wonderful, thank you. I just have one more written in question and one hand raised, and then we will close it out for questions after this. We had a question come through from Tracy Pigman, and it's really asking what businesses should do after they submit through the PPP. If they're waiting, what is the recommendation from your point of view on what to do? Is there a follow-up? How long to wait? They just want to make sure they're doing their due diligence. So just
Sure. That's a really good question. And there are small business owners all over this country who are in that same situation. I understand that the waiting right now is agonizing. You need to be able to make some decisions, and you need to know whether or not you're going to get this help. What I would offer you is, if you want our office to help, reach out to us, and a caseworker can help coordinate directly with the agency on any one of the applications that small businesses have in, not just the PPP, which, we probably have a little more visibility into the SBA run programs as opposed to just the bank programs. But in any event, our goal was to get the money out the door and not to have red tape and delay. And so that was the congressional intent. And we would be happy to work side by side with you through casework to ensure that the various agencies are following through on congressional intent. My office number is 888-205-5421. So that's 888-205-5421. Give us a call and we'll see if we can weigh in on your behalf.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and we will certainly be sure that that information is added to our follow-up email that will be going out shortly.
And please add my email or my website. It's murphy.house.gov, murphy.house.gov. There you will find a coronavirus or a COVID-19 part of my website that has various information. As soon as we get it from the administration and the agencies as they put out implementing guidance, we'll have updated fact sheets and other things that can link you to the resources that you may need. And then don't ever hesitate to give our office a call. My staff is happy to kind of help you navigate the patchwork of programs that are out there and see which one works best for you.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And we do have one more hand raised. So Wally, you are welcome to go on with your question. I have unmuted you. And if you unmute on your side, you should be able to ask your question. Okay, we may be having a little bit of a technical difficulty there. Wally, if you would like to type your question in the chat box, you're welcome to. Also, I see Brad Howard wrote me that there are some questions in the Q&A. I did see those, and it seems that most of them we have been able to go over. A new one that just did come through is question for you. Is a small business eligible for both the PPP with loan forgiveness and the EIDL loan?
Yes. So a business is eligible for both EIDL or EIDL and PPP, but the $10,000 grant would reduce the PPP forgiveness. So with the PPP loan, you will get forgiven for your money spent on payroll, rent, mortgage, or utilities. And the EIDL is a $10,000 grant for emergency situations. So they would deduct the 10, if you have both, they'll take the $10,000 grant to reduce the amount of the PPP forgiveness that you get. The two that you can't have together are you can't have both the employee retention tax credit and the PPP. But EIDL and PPP you can have together. And you can also roll your EIDL loan into the PPP amount. You'd have to refinance it, and you may or may not want to do that, but that is also another option.
Great, thank you so much. And I see that Brad Howard has listed out your phone number as well as your website and information to get in contact with your staff in the chat box. So that information is available to all participants, and we will also send it out in the follow-up email. So Betsy, I'll pass it back to you to close us out.
Well, I want to thank the Congresswoman, but I also want to thank key members of your team. Congresswoman Lauren Allen has been available to me literally night and day, as has John Laufer, and Brad is a great friend to our office as well. So I wanted to single them out. I know everyone on your team works very hard, but we've had instant access to information through your team. So I want to personally thank you for their efforts as well, and certainly for you making time in your schedule to be with our membership and our community today. We're so, so grateful. We hope that you all will follow us on social media, on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, and subscribe to our newsletter, which you can all do by just going right onto our website. Tomorrow, we are very privileged to have Dr. Jennifer Keebaugh, who's the medical director at Advent Health Winter Park. And she's going to be taking your questions and giving you an update on what they're seeing at the hospital. So it's a great time to get your COVID-19 questions answered about testing and so forth. That's tomorrow at 4 p.m. And then Thursday, we have Alexander Mestaw, who's going to be talking to us about navigating the landlord-tenant environment in the era of COVID. So that's going to be with a commercial real estate focus. And that is Thursday at 4 p.m. So we look forward to hopefully having you all back with us then. Check our daily briefings, which come out at midday, for more information. And again, our sincere thanks to the Congresswoman and her team for making time to be with us today. Enjoy your evening, everyone.